Sales Development Rep Outsourcing, Pros and Cons. Why SDR outsourcing keeps showing up in pipeline conversations. Building an in-house SDR function sounds straightforward until you live through the reality. Slow hiring cycles, long ramp times, and constant churn. When median SDR tenure sits around 14 to 18 months, most teams spend a meaningful portion of the year rehiring and retraining, instead of compounding outbound learnings. That's exactly why sales outsourcing, and specifically SDR outsourcing, has become a serious option for revenue leaders who need pipeline now. Outbound is also harder than it used to be, which raises the bar for process and persistence. In many B2B segments, it now takes 18+ dials just to connect with a single prospect. So, we'll just have the team make more calls isn't a strategy, it's a burnout plan. A specialized cold calling agency or sales development agency can help absorb that grind, but only when the motion is designed and managed like a real revenue program. Interest is clearly there. 49% of B2B companies say they'd consider using outsourced sales development services, while 59% have never used one. That gap tells us two things at once. Teams are curious and teams are cautious. In this guide, we'll lay out the real pros and cons and the operating playbook that separates budget leak engagements from reliable meeting flow. What SDR outsourcing is and what it is not. SDR outsourcing means hiring an external SDR agency to run some or all of your top-of-funnel work. Typically, list building services, cold email agency execution, LinkedIn outreach services, and B2B cold calling services. So your internal team can focus on discovery, demos, and closing. Done well, an outsourced sales team doesn't just do activities. It produces qualified conversations that AEs actually want on their calendars. It's also different from simple staff augmentation. With Staff Aug, you're mainly renting headcount and management still lives on your side. With a true outbound sales agency, you're paying for a managed system that includes enablement, QA, reporting, and ongoing experimentation. The trade-off is that you must stay involved. If you treat an outsourced sales partner like a black box, you'll get black box results. Adoption is already meaningful in certain categories. Roughly 38% of B2B SaaS companies outsource part or all of SDR operations to gain speed and flexibility. That matches the broader market trend. Outsourced sales services are forecast to grow from $8 billion in 2024 to $16.8 billion by 2034 at a 7.7% CAGR. Which reflects ongoing demand for scalable lead generation and increasingly AI-assisted outreach. The economics. Compare models using cost per meeting and pipeline. If you want an honest comparison, start with fully loaded cost, not base salary. A productive in-house SDR in 2025 is often $9,800 to $14,200 per month once you include compensation, benefits, tools, management time, and the hidden cost of ramp. That number becomes meaningful only when you divide it by qualified meetings and ultimately pipeline created. Benchmarks put in-house cost per qualified meeting around $821 to $1,150, while a well-run outsourced SDR retainer can land around $357 to $500 per qualified meeting. That gap is the why behind pay-per-appointment lead generation offers and the growth of cold calling companies. But the savings only materialize when qualification is tight and meetings convert into opportunities accepted by AEs. Use this kind of unit economics view to pressure test any proposal from a B2B sales agency, SDR agency, or sales rep agency. If a vendor can't clearly explain how your cost per meeting will be achieved and measured, and what happens when quality slips, the program is likely to devolve into impressive activity volume with disappointing revenue impact. How to implement SDR outsourcing without losing control. The fastest way to fail with sales outsourcing is outsourcing what you haven't proven. External SDRs amplify what already works. They don't magically fix a broken outbound motion. Before kickoff, we recommend validating your ICP, nailing a clear value narrative, and proving at least one outbound sequence that reliably books meetings, even if it's coming from a founder, a sales leader, or a senior AE. Next, define qualified meeting with painful specificity, because misalignment here creates calendar noise and AE distrust. Tie success to cost per qualified meeting, opportunities accepted, and pipeline sourced. Then translate that into written SLAs covering targeting, channels, reporting cadence, and how no-shows or unqualified meetings are handled. This is the difference between a program you can steer and a program you can only complain about. Finally, insist on data ownership and transparent playbooks from day one. You're not just buying meetings, you're buying learning, lists, sequences, call recordings, and message tests that should remain yours after the engagement ends. A clean 90-day pilot with clear go, no-go criteria is usually the most practical path. Contained segment, shared operating rhythm, and fast iteration based on real conversion data. Outsourced SDRs don't create an outbound motion for you. They scale the one you've already proven. So treat the partnership like an extension of your team and measure it like a revenue channel. Best practices. Treat your outsourced SDRs like internal teammates. The programs that work don't hand it off to a vendor. They build a shared cadence. Weekly stand-ups, joint pipeline reviews, and quick feedback loops on call snippets and email threads are what turn an outsourced B2B sales effort into a real extension of your brand voice. When outsourced cold callers and email reps understand your product reality, objections, and win stories, they stop sounding like a script and start sounding like your team. Multi-channel matters too. With connect rates falling, relying on one channel is a self-inflicted bottleneck. Strong teams coordinate B2B cold calling, email, and LinkedIn touches so each channel supports the others. If you're evaluating cold calling services or a cold email agency, ask exactly how they attribute touches to meetings and how they manage deliverability, dialing discipline, and quality assurance across the whole cadence. At SalesHive, we've built our SDR outsourcing programs to operate like a true sales development department. Shared reporting, transparent dashboards, and repeatable playbooks we iterate together with clients. Our model is designed so you can plug in the missing pieces, calling, email, LinkedIn, and list building, without sacrificing visibility into what's being sent, who's being targeted, and why meetings are or aren't converting into pipeline. The real risks and why most outsourced SDR programs underperform. The warning label is hard to ignore. In a SaaStr survey of 1,200+ respondents, only 7% said outsourced SDRs have really worked, and 26% said it sort of worked. That doesn't mean outsourcing can't work. It means most teams underestimate the management and enablement required, then blame the vendor when predictable issues show up. The most common failure starts before the contract. Outsourcing SDRs before defining ICP and value proposition. If you don't know who you're selling to or why they should care, a provider will default to broad targeting, generic messaging, and spray and pray volume that burns domains and erodes brand trust. The fix is straightforward but non-negotiable. Validate ICP slices and talk tracks internally first. Then iterate with the provider using real call outcomes and reply data. The next failure is optimizing for the cheapest vendor instead of best unit economics. A low retainer that produces unqualified meetings is expensive once you price in AE time and lower win rates. Similarly, vague success criteria create arguments instead of action. Put guardrails in writing. track cost per qualified meeting and pipeline, not just activity, and keep the provider fully informed with recordings, product updates, and feedback from the people running the demos. Optimization. Make outsourcing compounding, not disposable. Once a pilot is stable, the goal shifts from get meetings to improve conversion economics. That means tightening lists, segmenting by persona and trigger, and continuously refining talk tracks based on what prospects actually respond to, especially when your team is making the volume required in today's environment, where 18+ dials per connect is common. Your provider should be able to explain what they're testing this month, what changed, and what impact that had on connect-to-meeting and meeting-to-opportunity rates. We recommend an operating rhythm that forces learning, weekly reviews on objections and messaging, plus monthly deep dives on pipeline created and opportunities accepted by AEs. If the provider can only talk about sends, opens, dials, and touches, you're drifting into activity theater. A strong sales development agency will show how those activities translate into qualified meetings and pipeline, and will proactively retire segments or messages that are clearly underperforming. Scaling should be deliberate, not emotional. When a cadence works in one niche, expand to the next closest segment, not a completely different market that resets the learning curve. This is also where hybrid models shine. Keep strategic accounts, high-context expansion, and product feedback loops in-house, while an outsourced sales team handles repeatable prospecting, list enrichment, and high-velocity appointment setting. What's next? A practical decision framework for 2026 planning. The growth of outsourced sales services isn't a fad. As the market trends towards $16.8 billion by 2034, more providers will enter, and quality will vary widely. That makes your evaluation process more important, not less. You need a partner that specializes in your ICP and channels, communicates clearly, and is willing to be measured on outcomes. If you're shopping for the best cold calling services or comparing SDR agencies, references in your exact market segment matter more than glossy case studies. A smart next step is an internal economics audit followed by a minimum viable playbook. Calculate your current cost per qualified meeting, document your ICP and 2 to 3 value narratives, and align internally on what qualified actually means so AEs trust the handoffs. Then, run a time-boxed pilot with transparent reporting and hard go, no-go criteria, rather than an open-ended retainer that drifts for quarters. When you approach SDR outsourcing this way, you're not choosing between in-house and external. You're building an outbound system that can flex with hiring constraints, market tests, and growth targets. The teams that win treat outsourcing as a strategic lever. Bring in an expert cold calling team and outbound engine when speed matters. Keep core messaging and customer learning close, and make every quarter's results feed the next quarter's playbook.